Guys, we are getting so close to the full release of Double Exposure and getting to the bottom of everything that's going on at Caledon. Today, I wanted to give a recap on what has happened, my thoughts so far, and what I expect to see in the final 3 chapters. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It really helps out the channel, and I would greatly appreciate it. Give this video a like if you want, or don't. I can't make you do anything. Also, if it's not clear, this video will contain spoilers. Anyways, let's get into it. So starting out with chapter 1, we're finally reunited with our girl, Max, and we explore a really cool old bowling alley with Safi to snap some pics. We move on to Max and Safi talking at the Snapping Turtle bar, which kind of looks sick in my opinion. Safi asks about Chloe, and this is when we get to choose what ending we went with in the first game. Basically, we get to decide how Max gets traumatized, killing her lover or wiping out an entire town. We get to explore the bar and end up chatting with Amanda, who's a possible love interest in the game. Initially, I wasn't going to have anyone be my love interest in hopes Chloe came back. But now, I'm leading them both on, and if Chloe does appear at the end, like I think she will, I will drop these guys so fast for her. I do think Amanda's really cool, however, and she's super respectful with not getting more serious with us when Safi died. That's just a bad time to get romantically involved with someone. And Vin, while he is very attractive, I don't know, something about the male love interests in these games are always boring to me. Like, we got nothing when we chose that guy for Sean to be in love with in Life is Strange 2. I forget his name. Also, the guy in True Colors, who was very attractive, but also boring. I also forget his name too. He also didn't believe us at first when we said his dad pushed us down a mine shaft. But Steph always had our back. Anyways, back to Double Exposure. Vin just gives me a really weird feeling and I cannot explain it. Moving on from the love interest, we then move on to one of the biggest decisions of the game, picking our mug of choice. I have yet to do a deep dive into all the messages and posts on our phone, but mostly because it's overwhelming, because there's so many to go through, and especially we have double because we have to go through both timelines, and both timelines have different messages and different posts. But the messages with her parents are really interesting to me. It's similar to how they looked in the first game. So clearly her relationship with her parents have not gotten better. She barely responds, and when she does, it's very short and dry. They do ask about Arcadia Bay and Jefferson as well. It honestly makes me a little sad to see how distant she is with them. It makes me wonder what happened between them. I do think we will dive into more of that in the next few chapters. We then move on to the segment we have seen a handful of times already, so I'll keep it short. Max takes 2 photos. During each one, she gets a headache and even faints during one. Maybe it was coincidental timing, maybe it's to do with her powers, but more on that in my theory videos if you're interested. Safi dies, and the next morning we get to see her new photo wall in her stunning home. After exploring the North Quad, while we wait to meet with Yasmin, we have a few side missions to take part in. We can get the book out of the case for Gwen, and also get a package for Ben. Another reason I don't like Ben. He is so lazy. I feel like we do everything for him, but more on that later. So Yasmin asks us if we think Safi unalived herself, but for us as players, it's hard to tell because we barely know Safi. We get to pick a picture of Safi for her memorial. We then get bombardedly introduced to Loretta, who I think the devs want us to not like her, but I really think she's going to play a key role in this mystery. She's a podcaster, and we can get some helpful insight for the crime. We then meet with Moses, and if you're like me, completely forget to give him his hot chocolate. After missing the hot chocolate party, we venture outside to get introduced to Lucas, who is also a writer. We can intervene his little promotional campaign, or just walk away. If you intervene, you really get to see this confidence that's just evolved in Max, as she speaks about how nobody's taking Safi's death seriously. Finally, we get to see Max finding out about her evolved powers. After talking to Moses outside, we can still hear him even though he's nowhere in sight. Max holds out her hand and sees a glimpse at other timelines, After following the translucent Moses, we find the other timeline Safi. As Max holds out both of her hands, she inserts herself into that timeline where Safi's alive. We hug Safi, and then the chapter ends. My first time playing through Chapter 1, I fell in love instantly. I was ecstatic to play as Max again and learn what she has been up to after all this time. Personally, I felt it ended a little abruptly and not in a great way. We already knew Max could switch timelines, so ending on her finding out about it, I don't know, it just didn't really fill me with more mystery than we already had, but I was still excited to continue the story nonetheless. So moving on to Chapter 2, we are back in the Snapping Turtle bar. In this timeline, Safi is alive, with Safi and Yasmin. At this point, we can start to shift between timelines, so we get to explore each area twice with different energies and even people. We find out about someone throwing a cow skull into Safi's windshield. For some reason, I feel like this is not connected to her death. Max also says my new favorite phrase, oofa doofa.
Oofa doofa.
Oofa
That's
doofa.
gonna take some...
After we leave the bar, we put our detective hats on and start asking questions in both timelines to solve the case. Vin, again, is rude and is having other people do the work for him. This time, finding his lost phone. Quote unquote, his phone. Because how does he not remember his own password? And then the photo we find of him and Safi. Why is that a thing? Oh my god, we have so much to learn about the both of them. Then as we explore the fine arts building, we get to see Gwen being escorted out. So we had the perfect opportunity to snoop in her office and get some tea. We can hear 3 voicemails, one from her wife Claudia, one from a concerned student, and one from Yasmin, whom is informing her to leave the premises. In the opposite timeline, we can hear a voicemail from Vin, and it gives the impression that he knew what Gwen did. We find out Gwen was the reason for Safi's book deal ending. After leaving her office, we switch between timelines to break into Lucas's briefcase. We find out he has a restraining order against Safi in the works, and his reasoning for it is he thinks Safi is the one telling his son these horrible things about him and his wife's relationship. Moving on to Drunk Vin, we find out he loves tarot cards, which I can appreciate. Leaving the building, we find Reggie having a panic attack and reveals he saw himself. We go up to the crime scene to explore, and the first thing that's a bit odd is this box of candy Heartstoppers. Max says they look exactly like Safi's favorite candy, but it's not the same. Then we find Safi's phone from the other timeline. It rings, and we can hear it playing her last phone call before she died. Max drops it in a panic. We bump into Gwen and find out they have video proof of someone who looks exactly like her selling drugs on campus on a saved flash drive. Gwen tries to burn it, but we can intervene to see what was on it. I chose to believe Gwen because something here is not adding up. Gwen leaves, and as we inspect the crime scene, we see where Safi's body laid, there are flowers growing. Loretta shows up and gives us some insight on a previous murder that happened years ago of Maya, who was Safi's friend, and Loretta mentions Safi's death always comes back to Maya, so maybe somehow they are actually connected. Moses blows up her phone in need of our company, and when we arrive we meet Detective Alderman and find out Moses stole Safi's camera from the crime scene. We use our powers to get the camera that he hid in an event as we avoid being caught by Alderman. This is the time we discover Max can send items to other timelines. We know this from her moving the crates to get into the vent. They start to glow. When she presses harder, the telescope that's not built in the dead timeline is put together and gets switched with the alive timeline. We can choose to be cooperative with Alderman if we find anything out, which for now, I don't think it would hurt to have a detective on our side, though I do believe he knows about Max's past. In the trailer, he says all this death comes back to you and points at Max, which is partly why I believe it to be true. We go back to Max's place, we get our cat if you get the DLC, look at the evidence we collected, and we get to open the puzzle box given to us by the Abraxas student Reggie. If we solve the puzzle, we get a pin. Maybe this will be helpful towards the end of the game. If we need some Abraxas insider scoop, we get down to Max's dark room to view the photos on Safi's camera. This is when the big plot twist happens. we see that Sophie's last photo is Max pointing a gun at her. Moses storms off in fear of not knowing what to believe, and then the chapter ends. I found chapter 2 to be phenomenal. It felt a lot more fledged out than the first chapter, which, to be fair, the first chapter was mostly getting our toes into the story. I loved the cliffhanger this chapter left us on. It really got the gears turning for many Life is Strange theorists out there. So far, this game has surpassed my expectations. Going from True Colors to this, in my opinion, it's a major upgrade. I know we're only at the beginning, but it really feels promising. This game to me feels so cozy. The beautiful wintry scenery, the characters who seem way more developed than in True Colors, and having Hannah Tell's voice back in the game is truly what makes it feel so special. Also, I love how many moments of Max's past we get to see. I was worried at first we wouldn't get many, but there's been a lot. Even though it's not Chloe's original voice, I love the little moments of Max thinking of her. Now for what I think we will see in these coming chapters, for starters, I think we will get to hear more about how Max handled her trauma and how it's still affecting her. Maybe some flashbacks, maybe some nightmares. We know we are going to open up to Moses about her powers. I mentioned earlier I think we will see more about Max in her relationship with her parents. Clearly there's something that happened between them that we just don't know yet, still to this day. One huge thing that we're going to find out is if the timelines are meshing together into one, and if there's someone shapeshifting into these people wreaking havoc on their lives. So far, we know about Lucas, Gwen, and Reggie, and now Max. They've all been impersonated, so I'm sure many more have been. We know the leaker who I keep referencing in my videos mentioned someone else that does have powers. I love the idea of Max's comeback to the series being her going up against someone else with powers. We are definitely going to find out what Vin, same as Gwen and Lucas. Pretty sure we are going to dive into more of the Abraxas Society's history and its importance. Also going to find out how all these Polaroids are appearing from other timelines, which is probably connected to the timelines blending. I might sound like a broken record, but I believe Chloe will show up in the game. Maybe even more returning characters from the past. And of course, find out who/what killed Sophie. Was it actually Max? Maybe from the future? Was it a shapeshifter setting her up? We definitely gotta find out how the death even happened, because in my last video I discussed it didn't even make sense due to the fact we heard the gunshot, saw an aura, then saw Sophie fine, but a minute later she was dead? And somehow her last picture on her camera was Max holding a gun crying. I think the fact that she's crying makes it seem like it is the real Max doing it from the future to prevent something worse from happening. So of course it pained her that the only way to prevent it from happening is to kill Sophie. And finally, the really big one we are all begging for is we are definitely going to see Max continue to be thirsty.
Fuck me.
Oh. I cannot believe, after all this time waiting to see if we will ever get to play as Max again, it's finally here. I love Max as a character so much, and playing as her again feels so full circle. If you guys are interested in hearing more about my theories I mentioned more in depth, you can check out my other videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and now the time has finally come to continue Max's story. So, I will see you guys when Double Exposure fully releases here in a few days.
Oofa doofa.
Oofa
That's
doofa.
gonna take some getting used to.